I'm Nicole.
I'm Rolando.
And I'm Eddie Z.
And this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals,
an original podcast
about unoriginality.
And this is episode 2 of our Nosferatu series. And today we will focus on Nosferatu, the 2024 Robert Eggers horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Eggers is a filmmaker that we've never discussed on this podcast before, but this is only his 4th film, followed by The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and his first, that doesn't have the, it's just Nosferatu.
Yeah, are you a fan of Robert Eggers?
I will go see a film by him, but it's not like I'm like, oh my God, the new Robert Eggers movie's out. You know, it's not like that. So
I am finding myself being more and more like, oh my God, a new film by Robert Eggers. I'm going to go check it out. Because even though Northman did not like it, respect. I'm glad I did see it, but I did not like it. It's my least favorite of the Robert Eggers film. But even then, that did not stop me from my excitement from learning that he is doing Nosferatu. And I was just like, okay, and I think a much better genre for him anyway, because the Northman showed me he's just like, action is, you steer clear from this. Action is not necessarily your cup of tea.
That's a critique that he definitely got for the Northman.
Yeah, stick to Dread.
This movie had a $50 million budget, by the way.
That's kind of small, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
For like a big Hollywood Christmas day, that's kind of small, which is ridiculous.
Especially for the quality of like the set designs.
And the costumes.
Yeah, like it's just like that's probably where they blew most of their budget, to be quite honest. Then.
No, absolutely. As of the recording of this episode, which is the first day of 2025, the film has grossed $48 million. So I think it's on its way to at least break even.
I think by word of mouth, more people will probably watch this.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And speaking of word of mouth, overall, I think the reviews have been good, although there has been some division on the film. Fun facts about this: Robert Eggers directed a play in college. I think it was college, maybe high school.
It was high school.
He directed a play in high school, which was an adaptation of Nosferatu.
Yes, and then a stage manager from a real theater saw that he saw it, and was like, "Hey, do you want to redo this with a little bit of a higher budget and in a professional setting?" And he was just like, "Yeah." So like him and his friend did it, and that's where he found his passion. He claims he found his passion for film, for directing.
He wanted this to be maybe his first film. Or he wanted to make it right after The Witch.
He definitely wanted to be, like, this was in production for 10 years, apparently.
Yeah. Apparently he wrote a novella all from Ellen's, like, backstory and perspective. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to really understand her as a character. So he wrote this whole novella about her. He had it for the past 9 years.
Because like, if he made this before The Lighthouse, he may not have had his new muse, which I think is Willem Dafoe. Yeah. Because I feel like him and Willem Dafoe are a match made in heaven, right? Like, I'm loving this filmmaker who's found his muse in like a older gentleman who's just giving him the performance to just give these standout performances. While we were watching the film, Eddie actually said, he whispered to me, he was like, I think Willem Dafoe is just stealing the show. It's just like, yeah, no, Willem Dafoe steals focus from everything because he's so good in these roles.
Absolutely does. Yeah. We should do a brief summary of 2024's Nosferatu.
Yeah, so the 2024 Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggers, is a narrative film that centers around Ellen Hutter, who's played by Lily Rose Depp. Yes, guys, Lily Rose Depp, the daughter of Johnny Depp. See, at the beginning of the film, she's haunted by visions of a demonic entity that have been with her since childhood. She's married to Thomas, who has been sent to Transylvania to sign off on a real estate purchase for Count Orlok. From there, Count Orlok keeps him hostage. The rest of the movie unfolds similar to that of Dracula.
And of Nosferatu, the 1922 film, it is a 102-year-old film. Our previous episode, we did talk about it. But if you have never seen it, you want to go blind into it, spoiler warning. If you don't want to know anything, you might not want to listen to this episode. Come back, watch it later. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's essentially, the story. Now, very much follows the beats of Nosferatu, but it also adds a lot, especially with this whole character of Ellen. It completely centers it on her.
Which he said in an interview that the reason he did that was because how Ellen is so important to the ending of the original film. He figured like, well, we should start the film with her too. And the film starts off with like her having a nightmare almost, where she's calling upon an entity to, take her, right?
Yeah.
How do we want her to take? How do we want this entity to take her? We don't know yet, but it's implied. It's very sexual in manner.
Literally looks like she's having an orgasm right before the title Nosferatu comes on screen.
Yeah, Lily Rose Depp is good at faking that orgasm, guys. So be careful.
Yeah. By the way, you're welcome for showing you Possession.
Oh, true. Yeah.
I think that this film, Possession, 1981's Possession, with starring Isabella Adjani, had a profound influence on this movie.
Yeah, on some performance choices too. I would agree.
Yes.
Absolutely. What to start with? The performances, the traditional way of storytelling that he chose to do here. The fact that, by the way, I don't know what theater you saw this in, but I visited in-laws over the holidays. We saw it at a local Oklahoma theater, and they liked sitting all the way in the back. Very comfortable, really nice, but oh my God, sitting all the way in the back of a theater and watching this film on a regular DCP projection did not do it any favors because it was very hard for me to see.
Oh, I had the opposite. Ours was, so we saw it at Paramus at the Dolby Experience.
Very nice.
And I actually think it was a little bit too, I think the lighting was a little off because like it was, not the lighting of the film, like the way the projector was, because it was a little too bright at times. And you could tell that was not the intention.
I was convinced it was the theater. Now you're kind of letting me know that it was, but how do we like the way that this film was shot?
I liked actually a lot of how it was shot. I think it was my favorite scenes actually, outside of the beautiful lighting of the outdoors. My favorite scenes tended to be the inside their homes, right? Because like they were like all in like stationary shots, and the camera would just like kind of pan around, and it felt so claustrophobic, so small, so tight. Which is unlike what you get in traditional Hollywood filmmaking, where they try to make these like, especially like older like period movies, they make them seem like grandiose, like larger than life, and in homes that they've never really in real life would have experienced, right? And in this one, quite the opposite. Like the bedrooms are so small and so claustrophobic. It kind of it made you, I don't know, like you know how like Count Orlok had like this like heavy laborious breathing, like like my pug. I think the claustrophobic scenes like kind of added to that kind of like claustrophobia, where even you yourself are finding it like hard to breathe at times. Or for example, when we go to William Dafoe's home, like it was so cluttered, so full of mess and stuff, right? And everything was just so tight, and he just felt like kind of just like, I don't know, just like you had, like when I'm watching it, I just felt like I had to be like kind of like this, like like kind of hunched over and stuff, like to keep to feel to have room.
Yeah, I think that the set design, absolutely the production design, the costumes, aces all around. I do think, I mean, Gordon Willis was known as the Prince of Darkness. He was a cinematographer who shot The Godfather. He would, take his f-stop reading and then he would put it a stop down. And he, wanted films to kind of have this, just an overall not as exposed, darker, more contrast look. And so I think the cinematographer might have been influenced by that. And the cinematography is by Jaron Blaschke. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He has done all of the cinematography for Robert Eggers movies. He's also done Knock at the Cabin by M. Night Shyamalan. So he's quite young.
Oh, Knock on the Cabin. That's the one that's a gay movie.
Yes, queer parents are in that film. Some of my favorite scenes are when they're in darkness and the way that they're kind of like sometimes succumb to the darkness. There's like this one scene where it's just her face and then she like gets enveloped in blackness. And I thought that was really beautiful. Obviously, all the shadow work that were homages to the original film, I thought were very nicely done. And I loved I don't know how they pulled off the carriage scene with no driver.
That was
a practical effect, and I was really excited about how they did that.
I wonder if it's practical with some CGI, like having like a guy in a green suit.
True.
I wonder.
And then you can key him out.
I liked the use of snow too. I love films that use weather to really give you a sense of atmosphere. It makes it just add to the whole, the coldness of it all.
I mean, I did feel at times I was watching like and it was fitting for the time period, not time period, but for like the week that we saw it, because we saw it like between that week between New Year's and Christmas, but it felt very Dickensian, right? Like,
yeah, it kind of did, yeah.
Like I'm watching a Christmas Carol, and this counts as a Christmas movie. This takes place during the Christmas
season. They do, yeah.
Christmas Tide.
It counts as a Christmas movie.
Christmas Tide.
kind of wonder why they decided to leave it in Germany if they're all speaking English. I think in terms of 2024, we've come to the point where if a film takes place in a country, you should probably speak that language.
Or have an accent of that language.
Or have some sort of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember they went into the real estate agent and it was in German, and yet they're all speaking English.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, a choice. And I'm going to go back to Possession too, because it's this movie from 1981, you know, about this couple who are pretty much divorcing. They have a child together, and it drives both of them mad. In particular, the woman is definitely possessed by something, whether it is her own anxieties and traumas, or if it is this otherworldly creature. It just literally is like this thing that is haunting and taking possession of her. And the performance that Isabella Adjani gives is an incredibly physical and convulsing one.
Mm-hmm.
And it is ever present on Lily Rose Depp's performance. That whole aspect of the film is something that is brand new to Nosferatu, not Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
You could definitely see the combining of the two happening here. But that being the driving force for the film, and her also someone who I think is pretty new to acting, being the driving force of the story. Did that work for you guys? What did you think of it?
Okay, so I didn't know who this was actually when I first saw the movie. I never seen The Idol on HBO Max because I heard it was horrible. So I had no idea, no point of reference of who she was. At first, I did not like her. I don't know why. I think it was the cheekbones too high. She looked, but she did look very much of the time period, right? And but as the movie progressed and stuff, like she won me over. That performance was actually really, really. I thought she was very captivating. She was she definitely played that repressed, that sexually repressed woman who is trying to unleash her urges and stuff, right? Like I feel like the scene when she basically asks Thomas to just like fuck her after like going through like literally like a bipolar episode was so raw. It was both creepy and sexy, right? Because like this woman is going through it. Someone get her some Midol. Am I right, fellas? The blood, as I kept saying, it's just like she has a congestion of blood, which is usually I feel like code for she needs to go on her period so that way she can release some of this blood.
Yeah.
No, I liked her. I liked her performance a lot. I thought she very much, you know how like this is an issue that, and I'm only bringing this up because like it's important. One of the issues that like filmmakers are having with like some of the younger actors and actresses is that a lot of them have like get a lot of work on their face done, and they don't look, they have what's known as like Instagram face, and that doesn't carry over well when you're doing a period film, right? And like in this, like she looked very much like Christina Ricci did in Sleepy Hollow, and I think because of that, like I don't know, she just had like this like kind of like her face very much looked like a painting, like a very gothic painting at times. And it was between the lighting, the shadow work, and like some of her makeup to kind of make her look a little more hollowed out. It was just really to great effect and stuff. And I think her physicality lends to like the performance.
I mean, I think a lot of it relies on the physicality of her performance. Part of me questions if this was a little too much for her too soon in her career, because it's very demanding physically and requires just, I don't know, like a lot of chops to pull off. And sometimes the performance did take me out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But I don't know if I could do that. So it's kind of like, you know, me being like, oh, I'm not going to criticize somebody for something that I probably can't do. Although that is kind of the point of criticism.
Sure. Do you have an example, an example?
Yeah, this exact scene that you were talking about, particularly her tongue work that happened during that scene when she was kind of like getting possessed. And she's like, no, I'll be good. Or a similar scene, I think, with Harding, played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, where she just was going like that a lot. And it just felt a little too forced. It didn't feel organic or authentic.
Okay, interesting. I sometimes got the feeling that sometimes those scenes did feel a little bit, they felt comical. I don't know.
Yes.
But hang on. But I also don't like, but I think that a lot of the comedy came from the fact that like the men were so quick to dismiss like her as just like she's just being a woman.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so she's acting, so she's acting irrationally and silly almost, but like at the same time, you can tell she's going through something, and like the men are just like, it's just like, ugh, women.
I agree with you. I actually think that, going back to Willem Dafoe, I think he played this film as if it was a comedy. But I think that lend itself to his performance.
I agree. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that Aaron Taylor Johnson sometimes had moments that felt like comedy, which, I mean, I laughed out loud, but I also don't think that's a bad thing. I think that these men are supposed to be kind of viewed as like ridiculous, especially the character of Harding, who just has all the evidence that something supernatural is here. And he's like, you guys are all crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know if Nicholas Hoult necessarily played it as comedy, but I also thought that he pulled off. He did very good. He all of a sudden is like in all of the best movies, and you can't escape this guy. He's everywhere.
That's good for
Really,
him.
yeah, enjoying this rise to stardom that he's having.
I thought so. I thought he was playing Renly because like I keep forgetting. So my favorite iteration of Dracula has always been Dead and Loving It, which Eggers did refer to in his like process of making the film, because he likes it because he wants to show he likes to see everything that like is made fun of or is hokey about the Dracula lore in general. But in that version, Renly is the one who goes overseas and stuff. Renfield goes overseas, gets the paperwork signed, and then comes back like deranged. I thought, I was like, oh, this is so funny. He's playing Renfield again. But then I realized, like, oh wait, no, he's playing Hart. He's playing Harper.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I guess for me, Lily Rose Depp was the one who felt kind of comical, but wasn't going for that, if you will. So again, I just realized that it didn't work for me is all. I do think that Robert Eggers, in many interviews, said he did a shitload of research, so he knows his vampire lore, which is why he made a lot of the decisions that he did. Like you said, he looked at films like Dracula Dead and Loving It to be like, all right, what am I going to include? What am I not going to include? Which will kind of now segue us into the performance of Bill Skarsgård, who plays Count Orlok, with a ton of makeup and a whole prosthetic on him. And, a voice. It's very unique. It's kind of a combination of Bela Lugosi meets somebody else. I don't know. There's a lot of influence of all of the Draculas here. Obviously, Nosferatu was a silent film, so nobody knew. But apparently, Eggers said he just had a very dark one. Bill Skarsgård emerging as kind of a horror film icon at this point.
Yeah,
going from Pennywise to Barbarian to this. Which, good for him, because I think he adapts really well to it. And what do we think about his performance as Count Orlok?
I didn't know it was him, right? Yeah. I actually had I kind of went into the movie blind. I just knew Robert Eggers was kind of doing it. So I kind of figured, like, I didn't even want to see the trailer. I did see the trailer, but I was trying to avoid it. I thought he was good. My only qualm, and this is just my personal qualm, right? I cannot fault the filmmaker on this. Even my friend who I saw the movie with was trying to say, like, you can't blame the movie on this. It did seem it skewed a little bit too heavy on the Nandor, the Great from What We Do in the Shadows TV show.
Okay.
Which, as I'm reminded, it's just like, yeah, because everything is kind of like you're taking lore from everywhere. Like that vampire is taking lore from that region of the show. So not the fault of it. I liked the design of it, despite I know the mustache has kind of like been a hot topic debate for cinephiles and like critics and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people have opinions about that mustache.
Yeah, like they do, but like respect Robert Eggers, he kind of stands firm on it because it's just like you try find. I think his little quote was like, "You try finding a Transylvanian nobility without a mustache."
Yeah, it's historically accurate. So although it's so funny that he's like this. He's a monster. He does not look like a human being, but he's got a mustache.
It actually humanizes him for me.
It does. Yeah. No, I agree with you.
I have more questions about who this is, because also the movie kind of alludes to the fact that Ellen kind of is the reason he exists, or is as powerful as he is.
Can I touch on this? Can I touch on this? Because there's a lot of things we said about this character, but what William Dafoe's character states to her is she seems to be a person born with supernatural gifts. And he said, if you were born in the Greek times, you would be up there with like Circe and the prophets and the women that prophesize.
Yeah, you'd be a priestess for
Isis.
Yeah.
Yes, Isis. so it seems that was born with an ability, and with her moment of being young and innocent, and I wouldn't say horny, but maybe sexually, a lot of sexual energy happening. She calls for comfort. She calls for touch, and she
Yeah.
reaches out into the ether, and she happens to touch on a dark entity. And ever since then, this dark entity, which she said first appeared to her as something tender, but later changes, um, is what we know as this creature.
Mm-hmm.
So this automatically she has made a bond with this creature way in the beginning of her youth, and now this is carry on. So he's almost like the ex that won't go away.
The toxic ex, yeah.
Ex that going away, because now she's in the relationship with this guy, her husband now, and she's like, you transformed me. I'm such a different person with you. But then the ex is coming. He's coming. He's coming. My ex-boyfriend is back.
Yeah.
And he's gonna cause a plague. So
Yeah.
hey now.
Haven't we all been in that situation?
It's an interesting melding between Dracula and Nosferatu because they're very different. He kind of want to make Orlok a man like Dracula, but he also wants to keep him a monster, keep him as a low-life creature like rats. He's also motivated more by sex than Nosferatu is, much like Dracula, and it seems like Eggers is out to make the definitive version of Dracula kind of by the molding of the two, which leads me back to the fact that because of this, the storytelling is pretty traditional.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't add too much more other than the psychosexual elements that he adds to Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my questions is, well, one, how do we feel about this representation of vampire or vampires? And how do we feel about, the fact that he kept it pretty damn faithful?
So this is one question I have when I left the theater with my friend and Eddie. I was just like, why do you think he chose to make this a Nosferatu and not a Dracula? And I think making a Nosferatu gives him more liberty to play around with the ending and how he wants to, because like we know the Dracula story. We've seen so many versions of it. But Nosferatu, there's only been like I think 2 versions, right? The original and then the 1970s version. And sure, there might be others, but like those are the only 2 that people really know about. And one of them, mind you, is a silent film that like I promise you most people won't watch. So because of that, I think it gives him more creative license to kind of play around with the story and introduce that sexual element into the story that I think is so important to the vampiric lore, right? Even Twilight, a story about a love story between a vampire and a human, is a hypersexual one. Like it's about longing, touching, and stuff, and like this deep desire that he has of her, just from like the smell of her blood, for example, right? Like he has nothing but pure desire for this woman.
So the thing with me is I love vampires and stuff. Vampire for me has always had this hypersexual energy. I'm always looking for it.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for it. For me, I didn't think like this particular movie. I mean, he had it, but not as strong as I've seen in other movies.
Well, but I think the reason, so I had it. Yes, I think the movie was hyper sexual, but without
so?
Yeah, but it did. Now I'm not saying it was sexy, but it was hypersexual, right? The movie, like her like Lily Rose Depp, like her, oh, like when she's like in pain writhing around, right? And the guys are just like, please, with her mania, we must do that to it, right? And the reason they were like so ashamed of it was mostly I had to feel, because keep in mind this is still Victorian era. Even though Victorian is typically for the English, it was still cross continent, right? Like a lot of the norms of the English people, it crossed Europe. So the way people behave was still very puritanical, right? And so the people are scared of her because of how sexual she sounded. And again, and a lot of her, like, keep in mind, there's one scene that she has where she's kind of going through her manic episodes with Thomas, and what does she say to him? She's like, you could never touch me like he does. That does not mean sexy.
I know that there were points where that was like, okay, yeah, that's sexual and stuff like that. I didn't get the continuous feeling of it throughout. And that because the continuous feeling I did get was absolute dread and despair.
Okay, Eddie. So you say the primary emotion you were getting was despair. Is that criticism of the film or is that praise?
Okay, so in the beginning, when I was like, "Am I enjoying this film? Am I enjoying this film? Because I just feel so bad. Like this is horrible. Like I don't feel like this. There's this like a hopelessness that is that's penetrating. When I walked away was like just like Lighthouse and just like Witch. I loved it. I loved it. I love that it made me feel that way, and it colored me, and that this film colored me in that sense, because I felt like this is like for me an originalness from all the vampire stuff that I watch too. So yeah, so all the things that I did see that may fall under sexualized or not sexy, uh, a sexual element was really saturated more with the despairness. Even the scene between the husband and wife when she's like "fuck me" and stuff like that was just like, oh, this is horrible. This is
Yeah.
horrible. Because this is just even their intimacy is corrupted.
It actually, when you see for the first time Orlok taking blood from Hutter, it looks like he's assaulting him.
Yes, it did have like a very
And
sexual, salty feel.
yeah,
It
it
gross.
was gross and it was disturbing. How many times have we seen vampires, draining human beings and it was somewhat attractive? So he's actually correcting that. He's like, no, this is monstrous.
Yeah.
And this is, maybe he looks like a man, but he looks like, a fucked up, monstrous version of a man. He looks like men at his worst.
No.
And he is still this like nobility. He is this privileged person who wants to be referred to as Lord.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, he will drain the life out of you and ruin your life. And so adding that sex level to this, but also making it not sexy is important because it's redefining vampires in a way. And it's, setting out to kind of correct this and be like, no, remember, these are creatures of horror. The 1922 film is called A Symphony of Horror because everything about this is not supposed to be enticing. Everything about this is actually supposed to scare you, which is interesting because we've seen this movie done over 100 years and many times. I think he set out to make something scary. Do you guys think that this film was scary?
I don't think the movie was scary. I think the movie was more dreadful. Like there was this constant sense of impending dread when I was watching this movie. Not necessarily, there were some jump scares, but I was never scared per se.
Yeah.
But that feeling of like kind of doom is lurking at every corner of just every dark corner, like something is going to come out despite the fact that nothing ever does. That's what appealed to me, like that sense of dread, right? And I kind of like being in that kind of sense of like uneasy doom.
I don't think the film's scary. I like that they kept the Nosferatu ending as well. Like that's also probably why he didn't want to do Dracula, because he didn't want them to all like stake him at the end. Like he wanted Ellen to be able to do this and rewrite that narrative and keep closer to the way that Nosferatu did. It's interesting because even though it's not scary, I agree with you guys where it's unsettling. And I think that nowadays we're more sophisticated audiences than we were when Nosferatu came out in 1922. So things are always going to hit us different sometimes. But I do think that if you end up making someone feel creeped out, or if you kind of lead them with feeling dread, then I think that's more successful than whether or not the film is scary.
Yeah.
It's hard to scare now.
And it wasn't cheap doing it.
Yeah, too. It was earned.
Yeah, so you can see something, you can see a horror movie, and it could have all these cheap images that stay in your mind and like torture or stuff like that.
What did you think about the addition of the daughters, who, by the way, we knew the moment they spoke they were going to die?
Yeah.
I appreciated it, actually. You know why I actually appreciated it was mostly because so many, I think the trope for a lot of these films is like how men are dismissive of women, but I did get this genuine sense that like he truly loved his daughters so much. Like he wasn't asking for a son or anything, right? Like he was excited for it, but like at no point did they show him like being dismissive of his two daughters. Like it seemed like this father really truly loved his two daughters. I mean, he would have been content with just those two.
Well, I love how he's like, you have 3 nights and I'm going to wreak havoc, but he really just ruined that family's life and ruined Harding's life.
There were moments where I was like, these are like 3 different movies, because there is like that movie of that guest that won't leave, and it's just calling like wreckage in their visit is so wreckage. There's like the This Is Us moment where it's like couples fighting, and then you have like the Dracula thing and the vampire thing. But it like the thing with the kids is just like, you see, when your kids tell you like, oh, there's something under my bed, there's like something creepy, I think we take them a little serious.
Absolutely.
And then it's one of those things.
Never.
If he would have left one day early, because he was planning to leave the next day with the
Mhm.
family and take him out of town. If we would have left the one day early, this would have never happened.
Last question before we wrap this up is, we typically ask, and we don't always ask, but I think it's fitting for this one. Was this film needed? Did this film needed to be updated, to be remade in such a way?
Dracula's story has been told so many times, and there's only so many ways you could retell it.
Mm.
The most creative way being that BBC show that we watch, right? I think that was a very creative way of retelling the Dracula story in a new and fresh take. And again, Nosferatu, I don't think it's not as, it's very canon in like the cinemaphiles understanding of film, but not the general audiences. Most people have no idea what a Nosferatu is. Most people do not.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think Nosferatu is like the name of the character, which, by the way, Nosferatu stands for like the unkillable one or the unredeemable one. It's a term, a Latin term, I believe. So Count Orlok is a character. He's just referred to as this ancient, you know.
It's like the same people who make those mistake of the Frankenstein. No.
Yes, exactly.
Frankenstein's
No,
monster.
it's Frankenstein's monster. Yeah. What did you think, Eddie?
Oh, I very much enjoyed this. I I never liked the word like we needed it, but I'm glad we got it. Especially from this creative mind of like loving his other stuff too. And also I don't know, there's something of the use of, there's always a character in his movies that lets out a primal scream. It's done so well. This whole primal scream, this scream that just is total terror. It did it for this movie too. It was just like, this is fucking great. No, I really enjoyed this movie.
I don't think this film was needed. I don't think any vampire film would technically have been needed since the original, but of course we get them, and every time, most of them add something new to the lore of vampires, and they divert it. And they also are very in line with where we are in our contemporary worlds. Twilight was very of its time. The vampires needed updated and going in that direction. And so with this film, maybe now vampires will take on a new diversion and go into a new path where there'll be monsters again. Where they won't be these creatures of sex, and they will be these, rat, vermin type who are there to kind of take away your inhibitions, if you will, and your decisions and your clarity and whatnot, which is scary, right? Something coming in and stripping you of your control, of your agency, is now, in terms of 2024, also right after a pandemic, which, what timing did you have, Robert Eggers? The first one was after a pandemic, and now the second one is. It's impactful. So I liked this film. I can't say I loved it, but the more I think about it, the more it's growing on me, the more it's kind of infesting itself in my bosom, if you will. Not in my neck, in my bosom, because that's where more blood is historically.
Yeah, and that's where he bit. Yeah, he didn't bite in the neck here. He bites in the chest.
Yeah.
Which also feels way more sexual.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, because both, he bought men and women. He was biting in the chest.
Yeah. Another pansexual vampire.
Which I love. This is what I think is what needs to be coming back. It's just like a pansexual Dracula or Count Orlok.
All right. Well, guys, that's it for Nosferatu 2024. Be sure to tune into our next episode, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a lightning round where we compare the 1922 film to components of the 2024 film and see which one wins for us. So until next time,
stay unoriginal.